Today, we welcome the one and only Christian Contreras.
I told the jury that this is a nation built on immigrants. Our principles, our moral fabric requires us to be inclusive, not just those who we want to be part of our country, but those who are here contributing and making the society better. Mr. McGuire, he said this in his manifesto that street vendors are contrary to this nation's laws and principles. And I said we should reject that. Our nation's laws and principles require us to not violate someone's rights based upon their characteristics. They require us to respect those from all walks of life. And here in this case, deciding for my clients, that would be a representation of what our country is about. In Skid Row, it's a horrible place, a lot of despair, and I had my own encounters. That's the part that I think gave me purpose, because I was just around so much hopelessness. So that's really what drove me to say, well, we need advocates. And I always knew I wanted to help. Always knew that I wanted to be in a position of power to help. I kept thinking, well, law is a good way to do it. So no matter what level you are, there's always an opportunity to become better. Once you understand that everything that you use in your background is going to shape you in your future, then that's the best way to approach the situation, because then you could use it as a learning opportunity and as a growing opportunity. No matter where you think you are, you always have an opportunity to achieve your goals and to become better and to seize that opportunity in order to advance yourself.
Today, we welcome the one and only Christian Contreras, the relentless and zealous civil rights attorney, criminal defense lawyer, general counsel, business litigator, businessman, and trial attorney. By day, he fights for the downtrodden, the forgotten, and the victimized. And by night, he moonlights as an activist and community leader. You've seen him fighting in the courtroom, mobilizing people on the streets, and voicing the rights of his community on TV and on all social media platforms. Christian represents not only the vanguard of legal advocacy, but also the new generation of lawyers who've learned how to use and optimize the power of media, technology, and network to establish his law firm, business, and tangibly impact his community and serve his people. Today, on Art of Purpose, Christian sits down to share with us his inspiring journey. It's a story filled with challenges, struggles, and yes, even tragedy. But the gravity of that tragedy is outweighed only by Christian's passion, energy, vision, and growth mindset that pushes him along his upward trajectory and sees failure only as a learning opportunity. For Christian, the obstacle is the way, and Christian has scaled the highest of mountains. Welcome, Christian, to Art of Purpose, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I think anytime I have a speech or presentation that I'm going to give, I'm going to hire you just so you could give that introduction.
Yeah. You know what? I can only say what is true and what is real, right? So I'm just summarizing in a very, and I think even in a way that doesn't really do you justice to everything that you do. But that's everything that you are and everything that you continue to do. So thank you for being here, honestly.
Thanks for having me. I think should be fun.
Yeah.
Should be a fun time.
And you know what? Two things. One, for everybody, Christian is, I think, somebody who is very vocal and fighting for people and representing people. And, he fights for people's rights. And at the same time, perhaps, doesn't always want to talk about himself. And that's great. That's the best of people, right? Those are the people that we love. And so we really appreciate Christian being here and wanting to and being willing to share his story with us. And two, just so you all know, Christian's in the middle of trial. He's in San Diego in trial. They're closing on Monday, and yet he made time to come here and be here. That is amazing. And once again, thanks, Christian.
Yeah, anytime I have the opportunity to speak to anyone who needs it and also support you.
I appreciate that.
I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. All right, well, you know what? I'd like to start a little bit from the beginning. It's almost like we're going to jump straight into it, right? I think if we check out your social media page, your website, we see you on TV all the time. My mom, by the way, is like, oh, I saw Christian again on TV. And so like you're on TV all the time and, cases and all of this amazing stuff that you're doing. You recently had a huge verdict for the street vendor that was terrorized by this this person that was out there just terrorizing street vendors. A $2.8 million verdict. That's amazing. We see all these things, and we can see and look and go, wow, Christian's doing amazing. Life has been great. But what I like doing is kind of going back to the beginning and going through those challenges, because that's what's encouraging to people, is that they might find themselves in a challenging situation or going through difficult circumstances, and then knowing that someone that they look up to went through those things or even more difficult situations and came out on top. And so I'd like to start off sort of in the beginning. You talk to us a little bit about your mother. I know that she had you very young. My mother had me when she just turned 20 years old. So she was like 19 when she was married, very young. I always say that she was a kid taking care of a kid. I feel like you had also a younger mother, and you talk to us a little bit about mom.
I chuckle because I, of course, am very close to my mom. I'm an only child. Mm-hmm. So I think she has to, I'm her favorite because I have to be. I'm the only one. And not only was I an only child, she was everything to me because I didn't have a dad. Mm-hmm. So I think having her, it's interesting. I think it's an interesting dynamic, especially as a Mexicano, because there's a stereotype. Don't know whether it's true or not. It's usually a tribe, But
I hear you.
Every person of every walk and background, you have your little tribe. But it's just me and her. So it's an interesting relationship that we have now, and where she is now and where I am now. But yeah, she had me when she was 16 in Mexicali.
Oh, wow.
That's an hour east of Tijuana. Mm. So she had me, and when I was 3 years old, we came to the U.S.
Wow.
And so luckily for my mom, my aunt was already here, my tia Lupis.
Okay.
Tia Lupita. And so my tia Lupis lived in South Central. And so she lived in a back house. So this is another interesting thing, kind of, I think, of my background. Mm-hmm. So my tia Lupis lived in the back house in South Central. Okay. And so my mom came, and I think my mom was trying to establish roots. Yeah. And she said, well, I guess I'm going to go back to Mexico. My mom said that, right? Okay. And so that's what she says. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Right? So then, but the woman in the front, Olga, who owned the house and the back house, I guess my mom and her struck up a relationship. And Olga said, well, if you want, you could stay in this extra room we have in the house.
Nice.
So I'm just, okay. So my mom took it up. And so we lived there in a house with not strangers, I suppose. Right. And then my tia Lupi lived in the back, and that's how we stood in America.
Wow.
So my mom was ready to go back to Mexico. Wow. And so this relationship was I think interesting because it was Olga, and then she had children who were already adults, and they were all kind of raising me because my mom she worked during the day, and so I'm kind of this combination and this amalgamation of people because they were all taking care of me, and so I remember when I was going to elementary school, Hooper Elementary, right there on Hooper Street in South Central, and I this is actually an independent memory that I have, and I think I was getting horrible grades, and then so Tomas, which was one of Olga's son, he was older, he was probably in his 20s. They all got mad at me, and they were like, "What's wrong with you? You can't speak English, or like you're not learning English well." So they started tutoring me.
Aww.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to say I have a mastery of the English language. Spanish was my first language, and but I think that helped me in terms of my development because if it were up to my mom, unfortunately, a lot of people are in this position, especially Latino immigrant families. It's like My mom didn't even go to high school. She did. I think she dropped out of middle school.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, she was 16. You know, she was working, and then she had me. It's like, yeah, we graduated at 18 from high school, right?
Yeah.
So if it were up to my mom, I think it would be difficult because she was working, and then she just didn't have, frankly, the skill set. So I think that was a good thing in my background that I kind of often overlook. We think we forget about things, and that's one thing that I think helped me in the long run because they were able to tutor me and teach me English and ensure that I was doing well in school. So that was kind of the beginning of my journey here in this country.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. I want to share with you that this episode is brought to you by the Law Office of Kenny S. Ramirez. Now, life can change in an instant. Whether it's a car accident that wasn't your fault, a slip and fall in a grocery store, or even the tragic loss of a loved one. And the aftermath can feel overwhelming. You might be dealing with trying to get medical treatment, medical bills, missing work, calls from the insurance company, or just the stress of not knowing what to do next. That's where we come in. At the Law Office of Kenny S. Ramirez, you have a team, a family of accident attorneys who are here to give you back your time and peace of mind. We're here to help you get the maximum compensation you deserve so you can focus on healing and getting back to what matters most to you. Your life, your family, your future. If you or someone you know needs some guidance and support after an accident, click the link in the description below for a free case evaluation. You'll speak with our team and we'll help you get your life back on track. And we're committed to being by your side every single step of the way. No matter life's challenges, you don't have to face it alone. We're here for you. Now let's get back into the episode.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's it's one of those that, you're right. Sometimes things happen in our life and we sort of move on, right? And then when we take a moment to look back, we go, wow, like that was actually really important and helped me. You're talking about Tomas and Olga and everybody who was there. Thinking back on that situation where like it's this, I guess, I know that it was you, your mother, and perhaps it felt, you said like there maybe wasn't a tribe. Looking back at in those moments, how did it feel to have people who would otherwise be strangers, right, and no relation, helping you out during that time?
Well, I think it did help significantly. So I don't know whether this is true or not. I mean, some people struggle with not having a dad. I don't know. I don't. That has never really been a concern of mine, not having a dad. And so I think it has never been a concern because there have been people to fill that role. I mean, and my mom also filling in that role, and others kind of stepping in to really guide me. So I think some people say that, sure, kids who grow up without a dad, so long as they have a positive male figure or some sort of positive authoritative figure, then they'll be fine. So I think that's maybe what happened with me. I think, they definitely helped me. And I remember Tomas being a disciplinarian and just getting mad at me for doing horribly. And he had a partner, Adrian. So it was, I remember that house was always filled with people and just kind of helping me and being nice to me and kind of raising me, I think. So I think that was something that I don't think about. I frequently don't think about because they're no longer in my life. So for example, if you have a traditional family, then you see your dad and your mom, you're like, oh yeah, I remember when this happened when we were kids. Me, because it was a different situation, I forget about it because I don't see him anymore. Olga, rest in peace, she died. May she rest in peace, she died. Tomas died as well. And so, they're no longer in my lives. But I think now in this situation, thinking about my trajectory and growing up, I remember that. I think that was a significant thing. And it's not the traditional, the traditional way. A lot of people don't have that traditional,
non-traditional roles.
Yeah, and nothing wrong with that, so long as it's a positive household. And one other thing that I say, some people have a dad and that dad's abusive or absent or whatever. And I think for me, I'd rather not have a dad than have a dad who's a negative influence in your life.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And do you see any, as you're taking a moment here to think back during that period, and do you see any relation now to like what you do for people nowadays and how you step into their lives in those moments of need? Thinking back to sort of that sort of relationship, even if it was momentary.
Not yet. I mean, no. I mean, I often forget about those relationships, which is unfortunate. I should be more grateful. And I was speaking with Olga more afterward, but she recently died a few years ago. So it's just not. Just not yet in terms of a purpose.
Yeah.
So this is the art of purpose.
Yeah.
So not yet. I mean, I think I was just too young, because eventually we moved out when I was becoming a teenager.
Okay. Well, let's go into that period. I know that there was something that was very a big event that happened in your life and your mother's life that sort of altered things for a very long time, right? And perhaps set you also on the trajectory that you're on now. Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened with mom and the accident and how that changed things up for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, before I talk about it,
yeah.
One of the reasons why I kind of I'm still uncomfortable talking about it. And one of the reasons, well, first of all, it's a difficult.
Yeah, it's a difficult.
It's a difficult situation, and to me, so what happened was she was in a car accident which paralyzed her, and then we ended up being homeless. The homeless part, frankly, it was okay. The part that she's paralyzed for life is the part that hurts more, because she was innocent. And losing your legs, imagine losing your legs. That's just devastating. And she was in her late 20s.
Yeah.
So the hard part, that's the hard part about that. But the overall part, in terms of another part why it's difficult to talk about it, is because I think sometimes our stories not necessarily get exploited, but our stories overshadow our skill set.
Yeah.
And really our true power. So it's almost like a DEI argument, which I hate, which is, like, for example, if someone is in a position of power, they're there because they're a DEI person, and they're not worthy of being there. They're just there because they're a minority or whatever. Yeah. So with my story, I didn't talk about it for a long time. More recently, I've been talking about it because I kind of think I've accomplished some things, a little bit of things, and I think my accomplishments maybe will overpower that part of my story. So, but I think with many of us, or at least with me, I could speak for myself, I don't want that part of me to be the central thing about me. Like, for example, that's the homeless kid, or this or that. It's like, no, I have, my story is bigger than that. So that's one of the reasons, kind of why. Another reason why I struggled to talk about it for a long time, and I didn't want to talk about it for a long time. I mean,
it's
shame.
Difficult. Yeah,
and there's shame involved too with some of it, with the homeless part. I mean, there was no way I was going to talk about that in middle school or high school at all. Yeah. Maybe not even college. You don't want to say you're homeless. That's just
you're living it. It's fresh, and
so now I'm again a little bit more comfortable talking about it, because yes, I've accomplished some things, and secondly, there may be others who could draw inspiration from it, and I think that's what the best thing that could be done. But back to the story. I mean,
and by the way, Christian, to that end, thank you so much for being willing to talk about it. And I completely understand, and I know what you're saying. It's one of those where, like, you never want that to become and label you as you are that attorney or that person, right? In my case, right, being undocumented, like that's something I never talked about. Because, like, one, I don't want to get deported, right? And two, like, whatever, like, I am this other thing, right? Not that. And thank you for nonetheless being willing to talk about it, because I think it is something that from our point now and this stage, and we're both still on our journey, right? I at least I'll speak for myself, very much still on my journey. And but I also know that there are young people coming up from, behind me in different stage in their lives that can hear that story and identify and go like, oh, hey, I'm going through something similar. And if he did it, so can I. Right. And thank you so much for being willing to share and doing it for that, because we're helping people find their purpose in the midst of these difficult challenges that happen to people. Right. It happen to humans.
Yeah. And I think the other part, too, that I just thought about right now is, especially in our field, which is predominantly a field made up of white people. And in fact, when I was so ignorant about the process, about becoming a lawyer, that this is true. I honestly thought that to be a lawyer, you had to be a white male.
Wow.
Literally.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
Unless
That's how ignorant
you.
I was about the process.
Right.
And I was so ignorant that I thought you had to be related to a lawyer to be one.
Yeah.
We don't know. We just don't know. Right?
Nobody tells us. Nobody's showed us. We've never seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it also depends what the type of person you are. There are some people who are fearless. I can say I'm fearless now, but when I was younger, I could say there were some things that were daunting, very daunting. Now I'm fully fearless. I could do anything, right? But it was daunting, maybe thinking about the situation. Rejection is daunting.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
When people would ask me what I wanted to do, I always thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't want to say it because what if I never made it, right?
Yeah.
So another reason to talk about our background is to shatter that stereotype and also normalize that. Although it's not as diverse as we would like yet, it's becoming more diverse, and there are more like us who are in the field and who are trying to make it better. So I think that's another reason too to say it's not just privileged Latinos who are making it; it's the ones who had a rough background.
I think that's so key, Christian, 100%. And I tell people this often when we chat about these similar topic. It's that we can look around at our peers and go, wow, they had all these advantages or privileges, et cetera. But I always tell folks, particularly first generation or who are just getting started, and I go, listen, don't necessarily compare yourself to that situation. You have to think like these may be generations that have been in the United States, right? You have more in common with their immigrant grandparents and great-grandparents, right? And so you're establishing things now for your future generations as well, right? And your community and the people that you're serving. So it's okay that we don't come from privilege. It's okay that we don't have, this wealth when we get started. But you can do it, and by you doing and going through the process, you're also giving space for others to go, hey, I can do that too, right? And that's how we continue to increase even diversity in our industry.
Yeah, and nothing against privileged people. I mean, we want our kids to be privileged.
100%.
Right?
That's what I'm never mad at them. And I tell people, I was like, listen, I look at like friends and stuff like I'm never mad at them.
Yeah, good for you.
I see that as like dad, mom, grandparents, like amazing, like, cause that's what I want. And I don't want anybody to look at my kids. I want to be able to put them in that position. I don't want anybody to look at my kids and be like, wow, you spoiled brats, right? I don't want that either, right? So, hey, cool that people have advantages or opportunity. That's right, cool. But we can do that too.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the general reasons now that I want to share more about my story. And like I said, I think it was a very tragic situation. And another tragic part was that my mom never sued. So you and I both know if a case like that would come across our desk right now, we would hit it out of the park respectfully.
Yeah.
And another thing, not while I'm on this stump,
Yeah.
It's kind of hard talking about some of these accomplishments because it's like, well, yeah, you got a result or you got a settlement or a verdict, but at the expense of what? Someone suffered. So it's always a difficult thing to say. So, but in any event, if you and I both know if a case like that would have come across our desk, that would be, we would make sure the family was taken care of.
100%. 100%. And that speaks to just the lack of being informed, right? That people know that they have rights back then and even now. I have clients come to me all the time, like they didn't, or, it's like the daughter or the son, the adult daughter, son, whatever, told them to speak to an attorney, or they contacted an attorney on behalf of their parents because the parents didn't know that they could file a lawsuit for something serious that happened to them.
Yeah.
And it's not to win, it's not to get money. No, to be compensated for what was done to them. And in your case, that's the same thing, right? It's what was done to your mother. She didn't do anything. This was done to her. And, the fact that we have attorneys now that are in our community, from our community, for our community, that keep our community informed and represent our community. And that's exactly what you're doing, right? If I could ask, just as, you told us, the accident, the effect that it had on your mother, and you mentioned that you guys were homeless for a period. I don't want you necessarily to dig too much into that, but for other people who've perhaps experienced something similar or have experienced or something, just a difficult situation in your life, how do you, during that period, what was that like? And how do you, maybe in that moment it was difficult to sort of mentally, move on, but how were you able to continue forward and forge ahead to a dream that you have of being an attorney that you were even scared to vocalize?
Yeah, so the accident, because my mom couldn't work anymore, caused us to be homeless in Skid Row. And so in Skid Row, it's a horrible place. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still drive by. I drive by fairly frequently on purpose, actually. And it's a difficult place. It's a lot of despair, And I had my own encounters, which were unfortunate. I got beat up, got robbed at knife point. Jeez. And just saw a lot of things that I shouldn't have been seeing.
How old were you at this point, Christian?
12.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So that's the part that I think gave me purpose, because I was just around so much hopelessness. And I just kept thinking, how come no one's helping? And there were people who were helping. Mm-hmm. I remember people coming in, volunteers. I remember one time I went to a Dodger game with some folks. They took all the kids, because there's a lot of kids down there. They took all, well, actually, back then there was. Now there's a mission, the Union Rescue Mission, which has Hope Gardens, which they moved the families and the kids to the valley. But I'm sure there's still a lot of kids there. When I was there was a lot of kids, and they're my friends. I mean, I still talk to some of them. Mm-hmm. And so I remember some folks that came in and they took us to a Dodger game. And so even though there were some people helping, I still felt there wasn't enough help. And it just felt like we were forgotten. So that's really what drove me to say, well, we need advocates. Yeah. We need people who could help in some way. And I always knew I wanted to help, always knew that I wanted to be in a position of power to help. I just never really thought how. Mm-hmm. And then I kept thinking, well, law is a good way to do it. We have so much power, it's crazy. It's crazy how much power we have. And the great part about being a lawyer is that we're not like doctors where we're relegated to a specific practice area. We could take on certain cases which may be a little bit outside our practice area, but if it's a righteous cause, we'll take it on. So back to your question about how did I persevere? I don't think I necessarily persevered. I just lived, what am I supposed to do?
But talk about that, Christian, because that is the perseverance, though. You know what I mean? That is it, putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I will say that my mom persevered because how we got out was she got a job. So she was homeless. Mm-hmm. We were homeless. She went to school to get a certificate in data entry, and then she got a job.
Oh my gosh.
So I would say she persevered. I was just there along for the ride. I was just
yeah.
So I mean, I don't really think I did anything in particular to get us out of there. I didn't. In fact, it was my mom who got us out of there. So I think she persevered. I mean, imagine being homeless with a kid, and then Paralyzed.
Yes, I'm trying to.
That
Wow.
she persevered. She's a very strong woman. I was just there for the ride. It was horrible, and I think I was at the right age to experience something like that, where I was strong enough to use it as something as motivation instead of something that could have led to my demise, or could have been a very negative trauma where it would have affected me the rest of my life.
Right.
And I wasn't chronically homeless. It was just one period of time. I knew kids there who I could still think of right now who were chronically homeless, who their entire lives were homeless.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that truly affects you. I mean, one friend, Khadijah, we would go to the library. All the kids would go to the library right there in downtown. We had nowhere else to go. And so I remember she was one of my friends. And after I got out, and then a few years later, I saw her on Oprah. Khadijah Williams gets into Harvard. And I was like, yeah.
Dude, that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, so they did a whole story on her, and that was great. But she I think persevered more than me, and there was others, you know. And another thing I want to say about my story is that sometimes there's this competition about this inherent competition. Oh, well, you went through that, you went through this. It's really hard for me to really deal with that, because to me, I'm fine. You know, I'm fine. If anything, it was an attribute in hindsight, right? Others may not have been homeless. They maybe their parents divorced or something, and that really affected them. Yeah. So it's hard for me to say that, oh, well, yeah, I really went through something, because, I did go through something, but others may have gone through something objectively, which may not have been as bad, but subjectively it affected them more severely.
Yeah. No, thanks for pointing that out. And I think that's something that, through all these episodes that we've been doing, what I love is that everybody's story is different and it's unique. And you're right, it's all relative, right? Different experiences that we have in our lives. And I think what we see, regardless of situation or circumstance, is this common thread, right? Of nonetheless forging ahead and finding purpose, even in most of them, actually. I'm thinking about the episodes we've had. People have found purpose in those moments of difficulty, right? So thank you for saying that, and thank you for sharing with us that part of your life. So you want to be an attorney, you say, law seems to have this power, we can change things, but you're also kind of afraid of voicing that. You're like, and I don't know if I can be an attorney. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. How did you kind of get going down the road of, okay, I'm going to be an attorney. I'm going to give it a shot. I got to go to college. I got to go to, how did that get started?
So I think this is the favorite part about my story. And the reason why it's my favorite part is because I was such a horrible student. Horrible.
Cool. I love those stories. Yeah.
Do not follow my path. Do not follow my path at all.
But in case you find yourself there, listen.
So the journey to becoming a lawyer didn't even start until I was towards the tail end of college. I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I was also undocumented. I was undocumented until I was 18. So luckily when I was 18, 19, I gained status, but that was also another issue in my story, is that, well, I'm undocumented and you could be deported at any time. Yeah. Seriously. That's a serious concern. It's like, well, I mean, first of all, if you're ignorant, you don't know how the process works. It's like, well, can they just come at any time and just get you? Yeah. You hear stories too. Yeah. You're like, well.
Dude, you're driving and you're just like, you see a cop, you're like,
Yeah. So that was also another impediment. And then the other issue too is that I was a knucklehead. I got in trouble with the law. I mean, nothing serious, but minor things, such as when I was 15, I got in trouble with an incident with ditching, and it was a cop, and it was a whole ordeal, which
became a thing.
It became a thing. That ultimately, they gave me, disturbing the peace. I had that, and then when I was 18,
so they didn't let you have your Ferris Bueller day off.
And then when I was older, I again, being a knucklehead, it's like, what was wrong with me? You know, like a resisting arrest type thing. And it's like, I was, the thing about me though is I was always very rebellious towards authority.
Okay.
And so I'm not anti-cop. I'm not. But when I was younger and a cop would come at me sideways, I would.
That's authority. And
I would go back. I would say, you know, and so that kind of caused me some trouble. I mean, again, nothing serious, but that was another self-imposed impediment, you know? So that those issues were always lingering. And I thought, I don't, then the stereotypes that I had, and it's just like so many things that, I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it. But in any event, I always knew education was important. My mom always encouraged me to get an education. In fact, I remember being in middle school and she would try to enroll me in college classes.
Oh, wow.
And
that's cool.
And just make sure I had a good education. But again, I was a horrible student in high school. I had AP classes and I was such a horrible student that I didn't even go to the exam. I just, and I would ditch. And I would ditch a lot. You know, so, and it was, I was bad. You have to be a good student. And the reason for that is obviously because you have more opportunities. I mean, why hinder yourself by not doing well in school?
Adding to that,
Yeah, so I ended up going to ELAC, East LA College.
Okay.
And I could have gone to university, but I ended up going to ELAC because I was still undocumented when I graduated high school. So I just thought it was easier, less money. And so I went to ELAC. Horrible student again.
You're gonna keep it consistent.
It's like, what's going on? What's going on here? So eventually I made it out and I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and that's kind of where I picked it up.
Okay.
I still wouldn't study though. And another thing I have to say is you have to study. And what is studying? Outside of class, you have to read and you have to prepare and devote time. I would say hours and hours. I didn't understand that, and I would just
go to class.
the class.
How's everybody know this stuff?
What? I mean, I did okay. I would still get A's and B's. I would just show up to the exam at the university.
But honestly, I know that's not what you would recommend to people nowadays, but even that's impressive, dude. That you were just going to classes and still, you know, going through college, passing through college, getting A's, getting B's. I mean, that speaks to your aptitude. I know you're not going to say that. I just put that in there. Keep going.
We'll talk about how that caught up to me because I honestly, I thought, I'm smart enough just to show up. But we'll talk about how that caught up to me. And then, but I would work full time too, though. I would work at Harbor College, and then I would go to classes at night, and all of my classes were at night. And then so eventually, the year was 2015, and again, I was such a bad student that I was looking at my credits, and I remember this vividly. I think it was October 2014, because I graduated in 2015.
Okay.
And so in around October of 2014, I was looking at my credits and I said, look, I think I'm going to graduate next semester. What am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to move to Europe. So that I asked my mom, I said, should I just move to Europe or should I go to law school? She said, you go to law school. And I said, okay, well, how am I going to do it? I had no idea. Oh, and by the way, along the way, I met Humberto Guisar.
I wanted to ask you about him.
And so I have a story about him, but he was the only lawyer I knew. And I put air quotes because I didn't have his cell phone. We didn't hang out. I would just see him. But I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any guidance. So this is what I did. I said, okay, I'm going to go to law school. I want to go to law school. So I guess I just started researching and I said, you have to take an LSAT exam to go to law school. And I said, okay, so how do I take it? And so at that time, there were still only 4 a year. Now there's more. And so the last one I could have taken was in February.
To be able to still use that score for the law school.
For the current cycle and not miss a year. I didn't want to miss a whole year because I was already late. I had taken a year off to work full time, and then I didn't get it out of ELAC until 3 years. So I was already late. I didn't have the 4-year regular trajectory, right? So I said, I don't want to miss another year. And by that time, I had gotten more mature, and I was already I was older, of course, so I was more mature.
little more focus in what you want
Right,
to do.
right. I said it's time to get my act together. I can't just be messing around the entire time. And then so I looked up an LSAT preparation course, and they had a workshop, and it was at CSUN. And I show up, and it's the blueprint course. And they said, here, this is what we do. We'll help you take the exam. And I signed up for it. And I still remember it was a lot of money for me back then, a lot. So I did it. And so I was scheduled to take their course, the preparation course, in the winter break from fall to spring. And I was going to graduate that spring and take the LSAT in February. Yeah. And so I signed up for the course, and it meets 2 times per week for about 8 weeks or something like that. And it was during my winter break.
Okay.
And so I show up to the classes, and I think I'm doing okay. I'm like, I'm good. And I show up to the exam, I take it, and then I get an okay score. I get humbled very quickly. And then I was talking to others, and they said, well, did you study? I said, yeah, I went to the classes. I said, no, did you study? It's like, yeah, I went to the classes.
Chris, it's like belatedly killing me. Yeah.
Like, no, did you study outside of the classes? What do you mean? No, I just went to the classes. Yeah. You have to study. Yeah. And again, studying is outside of class. You have to devote, I would say, hours and hours to the subject matter so you could fully comprehend it, synthesize it, and be prepared for the next topic. So I went to the courses, but I didn't really study, right? I guess that's my excuse for the score. But anyways, I end up getting into a law school. I went to University of San Francisco, and they gave me a scholarship. So I said, okay, I got in. Cool. And I was like, well, I guess this is it. I'm going to make it. I think so. Yeah. I think I'm going to make it. And so this is when I get to law school, that's the portion where.
So you move up to the Bay Area now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, I lived in Oakland, and then commuted to USF, University of San Francisco, which is in the middle of San Francisco. And this is the portion of the story where then I finally learned how to study.
Law school did the same thing to me, man. Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, so finally, I started building learning habits, studying habits in terms of synthesizing after the class, making sure you understand, making sure your notes are fine, and then making sure that you understand the subject matter, doing the readings for the next class, and making sure that you understand it, practice exams, a lot of things where I finally learned how to study. And so then in law school, that's when I did it. And so I did well my first year, and then I transferred to Loyola Law School because I knew I wanted to practice in LA. Okay. And cool. And that's it. The rest is history. But the moral of the story is studying. It's crazy now because all I do is read and write. Now, and of course, I'm in trial and court, but I mean, this morning I was researching and writing an issue and filed a brief. And so all I do now is essentially study habits, which is reading cases all the time and writing. So, and I've taught at a law school. So it's crazy to go from being non-academic
I love it.
To it's a complete opposite. And I think it's crazy that I'm now at this stage, but it's great that I had it. I just never tapped into it. So I think another key to that, another lesson to that is you think you may not have a certain skill set, but there's always time to develop it.
Yeah. I love that. And thank you for sharing that, Christian. It's a great story. A part of that as well is just sometimes we don't have the knowledge, or anyone has told us certain things, because something as simple as, hey, you have to study outside. If you haven't seen anybody or somebody hasn't told you, maybe you just don't put 2 and 2 together, right? I've told this story in the past, but briefly, I remember going to law school and, thinking I was a decent student. I'm going to do well. I memorized really well. So you memorize everything and you go take the exam, you think you're going to crush it, and it's not the grade that you were expecting. Right. And I didn't realize that people were using outlines, and this is how they were using prior outlines that somebody else had done. And then this is how they input their information. And that's what everybody else is doing. I didn't know. And then when I did that the following semester, my grades got better. And so I tell students all the time now, hey, these are the things that I did. Nobody's going to tell you about them. start implementing them, right? And that's just helping students who may not have that sort of internal knowledge or passed on knowledge, and helping them do better. To your point, once you learn those study habits, your aptitude, matched with the study habits to produce the result that you actually wanted.
Yeah, and I think in law school, it's very easy to do well because at the end of the day, everything that you learn in law school will make you a better advocate, will make you a better lawyer, and will make you a better overall person. So unlike maybe in college where you're thinking, oh, why am I taking this dumb course? How is it going to help me?
I took history of rock and roll once because I needed a credit on
Yeah. In law school, everything that you learn is going to help you be a better advocate, analyze better, read better, write better. So I think with that mindset, and that's the mindset that I have now, everything that I do, I read cases every day. I'll go to the Ninth Circuit website, or there's this other website where I see cases, and this is because I have a decent memory too. And so I'll read it and okay, maybe in a future instance, I read something to that effect, and it'll help you analyze and create a cohesive argument. Yeah. So everything that you do, especially in law school, is going to help you be a better advocate. So might as well sharpen those skills and be a master at it.
I love that you say that because I know sometimes a lot of people say, hey, law school kind of didn't teach me anything about the practice of law. To your point, I think that you can definitely I love law school, and I thought it definitely helped me, right? And, I took courses that I thought would help me. I thought it was great. So I love that you're speaking to this because while it may not teach you certain things about the practice of law, because it can't teach you everything, it can equip you with the skills necessary when you go out into practice.
Yeah, of course. I had a great time in law school. I had fun. We were just studying. Yeah, I worked part-time and had other things I had to do, obligations, but we're getting essentially paid to study.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. You mentioned Umberto, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, for our listeners who may not know who he is, and how he, I think you'd consider him a mentor as well, someone, a partner now, a colleague, at the firms and that you work at and that you own. But how did that relationship start? And I think it's also helpful for young people to know, how do you foster those relationships, right? Because maybe you don't know anybody, and then you meet somebody, and then you can learn from them. How do you go about that? Talk to us about who he is and kind of how he helped you along the road.
Yeah, I want to talk about a general principle. If you're a student or if you're a young person, we're always willing to help. So don't be shy. Just say, the key, if you're in law school or even in college, just say, hey, I'm a student. Just start with, hey, I'm a student. Yeah. Can you help me?
It's like,
all right. We got to help.
Yeah.
We have to. And so if you're in that position, I was shy. I think I would say I was shy in terms of asking people for help. And I think that's maybe because we're men.
Yeah, it felt strange, I'll be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe because we're men, and I wouldn't say I'm a prideful person, but it's hard asking for help sometimes, but just say you're a student. Hey, I'm a student. I need help. And that always works. But in terms of Umberto, I love basketball. I was the captain of my basketball team in high school.
Oh, okay.
And I wasn't good enough to make it.
About you. It's awesome.
I wasn't good enough to make it to college, though.
Yeah.
So after high school, I said, well, I love basketball. I need to play.
Yeah.
So LA Fitness, they have
the runs,
basketball gyms. And so at the time, I lived in Lincoln Heights. And so that's next to Dodger Stadium, essentially, and next to Boyle Heights. And so the closest LA Fitness to me was one in Alhambra.
Okay.
So my schedule just worked out that I would go after 5. Okay. And this started when I was around 18.
Yeah.
And so I would go, and then the gym is a very interesting place, I will say. And I would go every day. I still work out a lot. I try to work out a lot, but back then, before law school, I would always be in the gym for hours, working out, playing basketball. I would just hang out. That's where I would hang out at. But it's an interesting place because I was there so much and others were there so much that we have this friendship and this bond that it's, hey, you're my gym buddy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes you have no idea who these people are.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and you may know their name, you may not.
Yeah.
And
By the way, you and my brother would, I think, get along really well. He loves basketball, and that's literally what he does to the 24. And like, just like
Yeah.
same thing, right? Hoop buddies, and like, but you're right. And like, I go play with them sometimes, and it's just like you play with these people, and like, yeah, you realize you don't know anything about them other than they're cool, and you play, and you're at the
yeah,
gym.
exactly. And so, and people have nicknames and so forth.
Yeah.
So when I would go to the gym, there was the standard crew,
Mm-hmm.
and so people had different names and so forth, Enforcer, Chewy, or lo que sea, and then one guy was very vocal. This older gentleman, very very vocal, had his little headband and his little armbands and little gym gear. He was always talking
awesome.
smack
Yeah.
on the court, and they would call him lawyer. Like,
Okay.
hey, lawyer, cut it out. Oh, come on, lawyer, stop fouling. He was very aggressive
Yeah.
on the court.
Yeah.
And he would foul me and stuff. And
Yeah.
he would piss me off. And so eventually this gentleman named Lawyer,
Yeah.
I stop him
Mm-hmm.
on the court. And I look him right in the eye and I say, "Are you really a lawyer?" Because he was this older Latino man, and I
Yeah.
thought, all
Talking
lawyers were
trash,
white.
it's just-
Yeah, and he was just like, he looked like a little cholo, And so he said, "Yes, I am a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
I am a civil rights lawyer. My name is Humberto Guizar, and I do civil rights cases and so forth and so forth." And I was very intrigued and inspired. And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing."
So cool.
So eventually, I asked him whether I could be a lawyer, and he encouraged me to go to law school. And so I did go to law school. I mean, he did provide inspiration, of course, and he was a source of inspiration. So I went to law school. Then when I came back, my second year of law school, I emailed him and I said, "Hey, everyone around me is getting a job. So as a law clerk, are you or anyone you know hiring?" And he hired me.
That's awesome.
And so that was my first law job ever. I had never worked at a law firm. I had no connection to a law firm or anything.
Yeah.
The kids nowadays, the people that have all this experience, I'm like, man, you guys are just light years ahead of me. When I was in law school, when I got to law school, I had zero experience as to how it worked. So that was my first legal job ever with Humberto.
That's cool.
And so I learned from him. I worked my second year, my third year, and then I graduated, took and passed the bar. I took a year off with working from him, and I just to get other experience because I had never worked anywhere else.
That's all you knew. Mm-hmm.
And then so when I was admitted, I started essentially working with him again. And so the thing I will say about Humberto is that he was able to essentially catapult me into a position where I could succeed because he was able to give me opportunities, allow me to work on big cases, put my name out there, and allow me to thrive. Because he tells me that when he was starting off, he was shunned.
Yeah.
He was put down,
I would imagine.
and he wasn't encouraged. And so imagine what that does to a career, what it does to your psyche. That, oh, get out of here, you former gang member. You should be ashamed of being a gang member, this or that. That could hinder someone's career, right?
Sure.
And so I credit him with being able to give me at least some sort of motivation and encouragement so I could at least take off and off to the races, right? Of course, my own skill set allows me to contribute to my own career, but it's a combination of things where I'm able to get to where I'm at. And he was definitely a substantial factor in getting me there because of just how he helps me all the time. I mean, he's always supporting me. I mean, just today he posted something about me on his Instagram.
Yeah.
So he's like my dad. He's like my legal dad, right? So we have a very close relationship. It didn't start getting close until when I became a lawyer because before then it was just an acquaintance. So I think the part where he's been able to help me get ahead, I think is key. And so, I mean, people always say find good mentors and find good people to help you. I will say that's true. That is true, and you should do that. This relationship happened organically, and it wasn't intentional, and it just happened, and it just worked out, and I think I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and thank you for. It's so awesome to hear people, honoring those people that have meant so much to them, right? And in this case, you honoring Humberto and what you're telling us. It's so cool, such a cool story. The gym, and to like be like, whoa, this guy's an attorney, and how that emotionally as well, right? And for you, like inspires you, right? In that moment to go, you know what? It's what we were talking about earlier, right? But before we started recording, like the stories can help others. Go, hey, like we have something similar. I can do it too. Maybe I never thought about it, or I had a wish, but I never really believed it. But now that I see it, I'm gonna go for it. So thank you. Let's talk about what you do now as a civil rights attorney. You do much more. You do a lot. Can you share with our listeners what you do? And I think the practice of law is not monolithic, right? It's not something that there's just one type of thing. There's many different areas. And one of the things that we like to do here is just expose people to different areas of law and give them these different options, because it might be something that they're looking for or something that they didn't know, but in hearing you speak about it, they go, that's what I want to do.
So I am a civil rights lawyer, and I specialize in excessive force cases and in custody death cases, that essentially cases against the government. So some of the more widely known cases are the police shooting cases that I take on, which garner media attention, but I also take on jail death cases. And then I have this other category of cases that I take on, which essentially are the cases which outrage me, and that I cause cases that I take on because I believe they need an advocate. And so I became a lawyer in 2020, February 11, 2020. Oh, and by the way, so I passed the bar my first time.
I'm glad you're going to talk about this, because I didn't know what happened, but go for it. Yeah.
I graduated 2018. I passed the bar my first time that November. That was probably one of the happiest moments of my life, because everyone has some sort of doubt, right? And then I said, wow, I passed the bar. And allegedly it's one of the hardest ones in the nation.
I didn't pass it the first time.
Yeah, so I felt validated.
Yeah.
And so then came the other requirement to become a lawyer, which is the moral character determination. So some of the stuff that I did when I was a younger kid caught up to me. So I had a meeting with them, and they said, well, you're not going to be a lawyer until another year.
Okay.
So I passed the bar in 2018, but I wasn't admitted until February of 2020.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Yeah. There's a gap.
Yeah. So, I mean, behave, don't rebel against authority too much within reason.
Yeah.
And so that happened. And frankly, it wasn't that bad for me, because I always had that thought on my mind that, are they even going to admit me? I could pass the bar all I want. Yeah. Are they going to say, no, look at you, look at what you've done.
Yeah.
And so Humberto had that same experience too, because he had a bunch of felonies. I don't have any felonies or anything like that. But he had a bunch of felonies, and he was a gang member. And he said a whole year after he was admitted, he would have dreams that they revoked his admission.
Yeah.
So it was unfortunate, but I was still happy, because they said you're going to make it. And I said, okay, good, fine. And so I had to take a year off. I was still working, of course. And the good thing about when I was working with this guy in Beverly Hills who was older. And he was probably late 60s. And so it was just me and him, he and I. So it was good, because he was like, go ahead, and he would take me to court, and we would do stuff. So even though I wasn't a lawyer for a year, he was treating me like an associate. And so at least I got a good experience where I was doing a lot of stuff.
Exposure to all that stuff.
Yeah. So then I was admitted in February of 2020, and I started working with Humberto. The firm is Gazar, Henderson, and Carrasco. So I was there. I was a junior partner. I still am. We still have some cases. But I was also working for Angel Carrasco. I'm doing personal injury. And so throughout this time, I was getting involved in the community and seeing cases. And I would see the cases. And I would talk to Humberto and said, why don't we take this case on? And so I would go into his office, And then I would talk about the case and I would be outraged.
Yeah.
And then he would hear me out. He would hear my spiel. And then he would just be looking at me. He would be observing me. And after I was done, he would be like, he would say, well, how are you going to make money in this case?
Right.
Which is true.
Yeah, because you're still a business. And you need to
yeah,
run a
we have
business,
staff. We have overhead. I have 5-6 employees. We had to. Our employees don't work for free.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we have bills, but I still wanted to take on the case because we have other cases which, you know, we could make money off of.
Yeah.
So after a year of doing that, I said, I'm going to open my own firm. I've had enough. I want to do whatever I want. And so I opened up my own firm in June of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, after being a lawyer for a year. But,
Yeah.
you know, I had that little
Awesome. Yeah,
test
yeah.
run when I
Yeah.
wasn't a lawyer. And so I've had my own firm since, I would say May. I officially incorporated in June, but May was when I started, May of 2021. So now it's been over 3 years. And so I've grown. I have an associate. I have about 4 other employees, including law clerks and paralegals and stuff that work for me because we take on wide range of cases. That's why I said this other cause case where I take on street vendor cases, or I'll take on certain cases which the community says we need an advocate. I said, okay, I'll step up and I'll take on the case. And so that's typically what I do. I do a lot of trials. This year I've tried 6 cases, 6 trials.
Awesome. Yeah.
Last year 7. I might do 8 trials, maybe 9 in total.
Yeah, no, man.
And that's to me one of the most fun parts because you're in there advocating in front of members of the public, members of the community who are the conscience of the community. Sometimes they get it right. Most of the time they get it right. Sometimes they may not when we lose. But I love what I do. And I think all the cases I take on are righteous cases that people need an advocate. And a lot of them are against the government. And so that spirit in me that is rebellious, that had always rebelled against the government, is now channeled through the cases that I take on because the government has so much power, so much power. And when they abuse that power to violate someone's rights, it's a huge injustice because we as people, social contract theory, we give some of our power up to have a cohesive entity, the government, to make sure that our well-being is taken care of. And when that is violated, that trust is violated, it's a huge injustice because it betrays our trust and it betrays our sense of confidence in our community. Yeah.
And the balance of power is so shifted one way that we need you to step in and be able to balance that out. I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the media and how I think, I joked earlier in a good way that, my mom was like, hey, I saw Christian again on TV. And the question is not going to be about like, what's the strategy and like how you do it. And no, it's more about like, what do you see as being the power of the media and why it's needed to talk about certain cases in a public space like that, maybe for the people themselves and for the community. You have a very strong presence on TV and on social media, but on TV, a lot of news. Why do you think that's necessary? And I believe it is, but why?
For a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is that in order for us to be informed as a society in a discourse of an issue is for us to have all the facts. More often than not, when something of public concern occurs, the government is the one who is publishing the information. It's the government who is giving us a source of information. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I generally trust the government, but they do a lot of bad things.
It happens.
And so one of the reasons why I engage in media is to combat their narrative. Most of the time, especially with police cases, it's a false narrative. For example, when George Floyd occurred, the press release did not in no way reflect what actually happened.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the videos taken by the members of the public, George Floyd would not have occurred. If there was no video about what happened with George Floyd would not have occurred.
The movement itself, yeah.
The movement, because we would have just been informed by the government, by the police, who said, "Oh, this person was high on drugs and they resisted and they died while in custody." No,
That's not what happened.
there was more that happened. So part of my job, first of all, as an advocate and as a voice for my clients, and also a member of the public, is to combat that narrative with my client's story, with the story from their perspective. Sometimes there may be inaccuracies, and sometimes we ourselves get it wrong. I'm not saying I'm 100% right all the time, but at the very least, the people could decide
Yeah.
how to be informed on an issue. And that is my job. I'm not saying you have to believe my case. You have to believe what I'm saying. You have to agree with me. But at the very least, I'm presenting you with my point of view so you could be better informed. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is also, again, channeling my clients' pain, suffering, and story so they could feel like their voice is being heard. Because that's a big reason why I do it. And because sometimes my clients ask me to do it. And so I do it. And because these cases are of public concern, that's the reason why there's a lot of media that's involved in this. A lot of cases are of concern, but the civil rights cases are of higher concern because, again, it deals with the government. Anyone who could be subjected to what other folks are subjected to. So it's good to be informed. And that's the main reason why I do the media, just to ensure that there are different points of views and then my clients' stories being conveyed.
Yeah, I like that. One thing that I've seen perhaps from afar, but certainly now as we're talking and hearing you speak, is I love how you are clearly a zealous advocate for your clients and passionate about what you do. And yet there's also a balance about you as well, right? Every single time, for example, right now you said like, hey, like the government, they do some bad. Well, not all the time, but they do some bad things, right? Or you were talking about the cops. Like, I'm not anti-cop, but these things do happen. And so we have to step in those moments. And so this may not be much of a question. This is me just saying this, is I very much appreciate and respect that out of you here as you're talking to us, because you are, as I said, you're a zealous advocate, you're an amazing attorney, and you fight for and represent people who have been violated or whose rights have been violated in very serious and egregious ways. And yet I think the best of attorneys are people that can channel that, and yet there is a sense of balance, because at times we have to look at a case for what it is or what it's not. And in order for me, for my clients to have trust in me so that I can make the best decisions for them, I need to be passionate, but I also need to be logical and rational at the same time.
Yeah, well, my job, especially as a trial lawyer, is to persuade the juror who is less convinced. Persuade the juror who does not believe in my case, and persuade jurors who may be completely against me. I mean, and I do a lot of federal cases too, which require a unanimous verdict.
Very different, yeah.
So, and I'll talk about the recent verdict that I got, which is a good example. But it's important for me to present a persuasive argument, which also attracts those who may not believe me. Because if you agree with me, you agree with me. You're not
worried about that.
Yeah, you're going to agree with me, right? It's more about persuading those jurors or those folks who may not agree with me.
Yeah.
And I know we live in a very polarized society now, especially in politics. But I think in order, and with politics, I don't think either side is listening to each other.
Well said.
But at least in a regular discourse, if we're able to have a rational conversation, I need to appeal to reason. And I think appealing to reason is being reasonable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So, and that requires conceding bad facts, conceding something that not may be in your favor, and using it and harnessing it to catapult your case forward. And so a good example of that is in the recent case that I tried. It involved two street vendors, Spanish speakers, Jonathan Alvarez, Tomas Leocadio. and they were subjected to violent attacks by an individual named Daniel McGuire in 2022 in Woodland Hills. My clients were merely street vending fruit at a corner in Woodland Hills, not injuring anyone, not harming anyone, not doing anything.
We see that in LA all the time. Yeah,
they were the nicest
great
kids.
People, great fruit.
Yeah,
Tajin, give me some of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so this gentleman, Daniel McGuire, Mr. McGuire, unprovoked, would just go up to the fruit stand, throw the fruit on the floor, yell at my clients, say vile, racist things, and intimidate them. And on 3 different occasions, he did this to Mr. Leocadio Tomas. And so Tomas left. It all came to a climax in August of 2022 when Jonathan Alvarez then set up his post at that corner, and it was his first day at that corner. And what McGuire did is, first he went and he tossed over the fruit and said, "Get out of here." This is on video. He left. Then he came back and he did it again, and he grabbed the umbrella and he tried to toss it on the ground. That was the second time, the same day. The third time he passed by, and in English he said, "I'm going to kill you." And Jonathan doesn't know English, but there was another patron there who said, this is what he said, translated for Jonathan. And then finally, towards the end of the day, Jonathan can't leave because he gets picked up with his equipment. But before leaving and the end of the day, Mr. McGuire comes with an axe, a long axe, and threatens Jonathan, who runs away, and then starts axing the fruit stand. And so, and this is caught on video. And so it was very unfortunate what happened. And adding insult to injury, McGuire also published a 3-page manifesto where he said very racist things, vile things, including that street vendors are all illegal aliens and they should be stomped to the dirt. They're cockroaches that should be stomped to the dirt and tossed out. And so this is a person who was very vile, very racist. And so no case is easy. It is one of my easier cases because I have very tough cases. But the tough case, the tough portion of the case was that there are many folks who maybe subscribe to that. Right now, immigrants are being vilified, which is unfortunate. This is a nation built on immigrants. It's one of the things that I said in my closing. That part of our cultural DNA, part of the country's DNA, is that we're diverse and we're made up of people from all walks of life. And we shouldn't be so divisive and polarizing and hate others merely because of the color of our skin or where we come from. So the trial starts 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And I'm doing jury selection voir dire, and I'm asking the jurors, what are your experiences with street vendors? Many were saying, they're great, they're hardworking, they're great people. And I was like, yeah, this is a diverse diverse jury. And so McGuire has an outburst, and he was having multiple outbursts, but he essentially, once we were done with jury selection and I was about to do opening statement, he essentially told the judge, and I'm censoring myself now, but he said, "F you, you effing B word. Go stick it up your butt." He said ass. Yeah. And so, and in front of the jury. Gosh. And so the judge declared a mistrial. And then the judge said, well, I'm declaring a mistrial and I'm going to strike his answer, and he's now in default. And I'm going to dismiss this jury, Mr. Contreras. And I said, well, Your Honor, I would like to proceed with the jury. She said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I was like, okay, well, that's unfortunate because these are folks who witnessed what he did, and they should be, and I like them based upon what they said at the jury selection. So the judge excuses them. And then she said, we're going to proceed by way of a bench trial. And I was like, I don't want to do a bench trial for various reasons.
By the way, I'm just going to pause you real quick just for our listeners, okay, real quick. So Christian's saying that the judge is going to declare a mistrial. For those that are learning about the law and everything, basically what that means is that the trial has to start all over. It's going to be with new jurors, not the jurors that Christian just had that he liked, that the jurors that basically he felt would be people who would be siding for his client. So Christian wants to remain with that same jury because, hey, these are people who are going to listen to what he has to say and would be favorable to his client. So now that's not happening anymore.
Right. And jurors, they're not restrained by certain limitations that judges are. And so I was upset, but it is what it is. And so the next day, that was on a Thursday. The next day, the judge issues an order and reverses herself and says, you know what, counsel, in the order, not in these words, but she says, I'm just merely going to strike his cross complaint because he had sued my clients for assault, saying that they had assaulted him allegedly.
Okay.
with the knife. His words, right?
Story. Yeah.
And so I'm just merely going to strike his cross complaint, but we're going to proceed with the jury trial. And so the following Monday, we did jury selection again. And so this time the jurors were a lot more reserved, less diverse folks, older, and more affluent. And they were white. It was a white jury. Let me just say that. That's what it was. And I was concerned.
Yeah.
I was concerned.
Yeah.
Because, again, there are people who subscribe to that ethos, to that mentality, to those sentiments that, they're taking over our country. Immigrants, essentially. My clients are not English speakers. They spoke Spanish. Yeah. I'm prosecuting a case against an older white gentleman. And so I presented the case, right? And then in closing, my closing argument, this is where I really had to think, how am I going to frame the case? Because I thought he was racist.
Yeah, I mean,
but
all signs point to it.
Yeah, but I had to be very careful because what if there were some jurors who said, well, maybe Mr. McGuire is right. Why are they setting up? And by the way, McGuire said, he kept saying, well, they set up the fruit stand illegally and they didn't have permits. So I was abating a nuisance. And so I had to be very careful because maybe there were some jurors who could identify with Mr. McGuire, saying, well, yeah, why are they going into this neighborhood area? This is not a business district, and just setting up shop. And so, and I got the manifesto into evidence, by the way. And so I thought, how am I going to present this case to persuade a juror who may think like Mr. McGuire? So I had to be very careful in terms of not directly attacking him. And in fact, one of the things I said were to the effect of, and some may think that Mr. McGuire is racist. He published this manifesto and he said certain things and he attacked my clients based upon them being street vendors. Some may say he's racist, but we're not here to decide that. We're not here to decide whether he's racist or not.
That off the table.
We're here to decide whether my client's rights were violated, whether my clients were assaulted. So this is what we need to prove in this instance. And by the way, I had civil rights violations as well. California has what's called the Bain Act, Civil Code Section 52.1, which is the equivalent of the federal civil rights statute, 42 U.S.C. 1983. And the difference between the federal statute and the state statute is that the Bain Act doesn't require a defendant to act under color of law. Under color of law is essentially when you're using the state's authority to act, such as police officers. Police officers are using the state's authority to carry out law enforcement functions. In California, you don't need the defendant to act under color of law, but you do need to prove that they specifically intended to violate your rights, whereas in the federal statute, you don't. There's no specific intent requirement.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I also had the Bain Act, Civil Code Section 51.7, which states that if you violate someone's rights through violence based upon their protected characteristics, then you're liable under that statute. So part of it part of it was, yes, was Mr. McGuire acting based upon their protected characteristics? And I told the jury yes, because he said it in his manifesto, and in his deposition, he admitted it. And so the point of the story, and one of the points, is that I had to be very careful with how I crafted my arguments, because I told the jury that this is a nation built on immigrants. This is a nation where our principles, our moral fabric requires us to be inclusive of not just those who we want to be part of our country, but those who are here contributing and making the society better. And so Mr. McGuire, he said this in his manifesto, that street vendors are contrary to this nation's laws and principles. And I said, we should reject that. Our nation's laws and principles require us to not violate someone's rights based upon their characteristics. They require us to respect those from all walks of life. And here in this case, deciding for my clients, that would be a representation of what our country is about. And so the point is, I couldn't be too aggressive.
Yeah, no.
I couldn't be too aggressive, because then it may have turned them off.
Yeah.
Especially those who may have seen Mr. McGuire as someone who they identify with. So the case was submitted to the jury, and it was a 21-page verdict form. Goodness. And for those of us who try cases, especially plaintiffs, you want the verdict form as easy and as short as possible. But because I had 5 different claims, I had assault, I had intentional infliction of emotional distress, Ralph Act, Bain Act, and negligence. And I threw in the negligence just because maybe someone could think that he wasn't acting intentionally.
Yeah.
And so then I had damages. And then I had, and I had essentially 21 questions.
Yeah.
So I thought if they come back quickly, it's not going to be good.
Check.
Yeah. So the case was submitted to them, and they came back within an hour. And by the way, there was 2 verdict forms. Usually I like to have one for both plaintiffs, but the judge said just separate them.
Okay.
And so I thought, I was a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
And this is the only time I actually get nervous, when
You're
right
waiting.
before the verdict is read, because there's nothing I could do anymore. And my palms actually get a little bit sweaty. And so I actually was a little bit concerned, because I thought this is way too quick, way too quick. But they came back unanimous on all the claims, including the intentional infliction of emotional distress, which I think is a difficult claim, because you have to prove severe emotional distress, and the Ralph Act and the Bain Act. And then they awarded a total of $2.8 million in total. I think 1.5 for Mr. Alvarez and 1.4 something for Mr. Leocadio. And that was great. I think that was a good result for them. Some may be thinking, well, are you even going to collect that? Partially, at least. But at the same time, I think it's a good message that is being sent
100%.
to the community about cases that are representative of folks who are the hardest working in our community, those who are just beginning their trajectory in this country, those who represent entrepreneurship. Many street vendors, they start off and then they build restaurants. And it's a good representation of folks who really need assistance. And I think, unfortunately, we've seen in the news that they get attacked. And this sends a strong message that there will be consequences for those thinking of attacking street vendors.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Christian, thank you so much for sharing that. I think for anyone who's interested in law, that was an amazing real life experience that just happened. I mean, this is fresh. And those of us who are attorneys, we love hearing, war stories. So thank you for sharing that as well. What you just mentioned right now, I think it's also amazing for our community, because it's a representation of what we will or won't allow to happen in our community, regardless, as you were saying, of where sort of our beliefs or emotions or sentiments lie. I love your reframing of that and going, hey, like this type of action, we're not going to allow here. And the jury siding with your clients means that they agreed with it, and that's not going to happen in our community. So that's really cool. And again, that's the power of the work that you do, that you are helping clients who have whose rights have been violated, but you're also shaping community and what is and isn't allowed in our community. And that's a deeper impact than just an isolated case. And that is the work that Christian does. Christian, thank you so much for being here. I know we're running up into our time here. So, I just wanted to, one last thing, just ask you, I've heard, people talk about growth mindset. Can you do you have something that you want to leave our listeners off with? We've heard your parts of your story. I love, you mentioned earlier about how, hey, things just happened in my past. They happened, but I just kind of keep moving forward, right? Anything that you would encourage listeners, young people, as they're going through various stages in their lives and trying to follow and pursue their purpose and find it even?
Of course. There's nothing so significant in your current trajectory that will hinder you from achieving your goals. I mean, look at me. I was such a horrible student and didn't have my act together, and I was able to pull it together and do well despite not taking advantage of opportunities. For example, the community college, I think that's a great opportunity for those who didn't do well in high school to do well in community college, and then you could transfer to a good university. So no matter what level you are, there's always an opportunity to become better. I mean, for me, it was at law school when, all right, I'm actually going to do it well this time. And I did when I put my mind to it, and I did well. And I've maintained that mindset of just ensuring that you're growing, you're being the best version of yourself. Because again, everything that you learn and that you improve is only going to help you in the next step. So having that mindset in terms of, well, why am I doing this? Nothing is pointless. Use everything as an opportunity to learn and become better and grow yourself. And then once you understand that everything that you use in your background is going to shape you in your future, then that's the best way to approach the situation, because then you could use it as a learning opportunity and as a growing opportunity. So no matter where you think you are, you always have an opportunity to achieve your goals and to become better and to seize that opportunity in order to advance yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Christian. So from Christian Contreras, no matter where you find yourself, no matter what place you might be in life, there's always an opportunity for improvement. Put one foot in front of the other. Look for people around you that could provide help as well, and say you're a student and we will help. Right? So once again, Christian, thank you so much for being here, for sharing of your story, for opening up a little bit of your heart with us, and for encouraging our listeners, telling us about the cases that you're working on. It's inspiring for everyone, myself included. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for being with us. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Art of Purpose. We've had a great episode, a great time with Christian, and we have another amazing guest lined up for the next episode. So until next time, we will see you on the Art of Purpose.